everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I will leave a link to the original tag down below. I think one of the videos is still up, but I will tag the other creator as well. This is such a popular tag that everybody on BookTube seems to do every year, and I'm super excited to do it. This book is just a way to get a little bit of a check-in and see how your reading is going for the first half of the year. See how your goals are progressing and if you've got any new favorites or least favorites. I've been doing so well with my Goodreads goal so far this year. My Goodreads goal for this year is to read 80 books and I'm already at 64, which is absolutely insane and the most that I've read in 6 months in my entire life. Can't quite believe it, but I've got so many answers for all of these questions, so let's just get right into it. So right off the hop, we're going in strong and asking what is the best book that you've read so far this year. For that, I have to go with A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a reimagining of Dracula's wives, told from the point of view of one of the wives, the first one, Constanta, and it is told in a letter format, as she is writing to Dracula and explaining her thoughts about their entire relationship from the moment it started to the moment that it ended. This book was fantastic. It did a great job of talking about the nuances of an abusive relationship, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And it did a really great job of giving Constanta and the rest of Dracula's wives and husbands some agency back, because despite the beginning of the story seeming like she's a willing participant, there's a very clear distinction that she doesn't actually have a choice in what she's doing. Dracula never gave her a proper chance to consent because she was dying when he decided to turn her into a vampire. But it does a really great job of showing their nuances of their relationship, as well as Constanta's relationship with his other wives and husband, and it was just a beautiful story. It had really great representation, it had bisexual representation, it had a polyamorous relationship, and it was just such an interesting story that I think everybody should read. It's quite short, it's about the size of a novella, and it was published by an indie publisher, which I have been trying to read more of indie published and self-published books this year, so overall I just think this is an absolutely gorgeous read, and anybody who's slightly interested in paranormal stories or vampires should definitely give it a go. Next up is best sequel that you've read so far this year. I haven't read a whole lot of sequels, just a couple, but definitely I have a favorite for this one, and that is Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Nan, the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire. Girls of Paper and Fire tells the story of Lei, who is chosen to be one of the Emperor's paper girls, basically a slave, a concubine, and it is considered to be a great honor. The reason they are called paper girls is because this world is a magical world that is broken up into castes. The lowest caste, the human caste, being called paper, the middle class being called steel, which is kind of half human, half demon, and then the demon class, the highest caste, is known as the moon caste, and it is where the royalty and aristocracy reside in this system, in this hierarchy. And the world is run by the demon king. This story deals with a lot of really serious issues, including sexual assault and trauma, but the sequel did such a great job of talking about the results of said trauma and the beginnings of recovery from that trauma. This features a female-female relationship, which I love, and the way that this relationship was explored in the sequel was so great, and it wasn't perfect and it had its flaws, which I think is accurate for the high-stakes fantasy world that they are in. But I absolutely adored it. I think Lei grew so much from the first book and even into the second book, and I'm so excited to read the final book when it comes out at the end of the year. I'm just over the moon excited. Next up is to name a new release that you are excited to read but haven't done so yet. I've got two of them for this one. The first one is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutano. This is a adult romance, I think mystery a little bit. This tells the story of Madeline, who accidentally ends up killing her blind date, and she has to enlist the help of her eccentric aunties and her mother to help hide the body, but somehow the body ends up being shipped to the wedding that they are planning on helping out at. It is set on a island setting, and it deals with all of the craziness and shenanigans that a plot like that would entail. I've heard nothing but great things about this, and I can't wait to read it. I'm hopefully going to be reading it next month. Next up is Ace of Shades by Farida Abike Iyamide. This is a I think it's a YA mystery thriller, kind of dark academia set at a boarding school with a bunch of mysteries and secret societies. And I'm super excited about it. That is all I know about it, but I've heard this book be hyped up so much and I absolutely can't wait to read it. I just got it in the mail today, so I am pumped to give this a read as soon as possible. Next up is to name your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. For this, I've got 3. The first is The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. This is the spin-off sequel to the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. Truly Devious follows a character named Stevie Bell, who is a high school student who's obsessed with true crime. She has anxiety, she doesn't do well in her very conservative family, and she just wants some type of escape. She ends up being accepted to Ellingham Academy, which is this special school up in the middle of like the woods in Vermont, in which students are allowed to, or if they are accepted, they spend the last 2 years of their high school at this academy, where they can study whatever they want free of charge and with room and board. Ellingham Academy was created by Albert Ellingham back in the 1930s, and you get a simultaneous look at Stevie's life at the academy, as well as a look into the mystery surrounding the academy from back in the 1930s when it was created, when Ellingham's wife and daughter went missing and were kidnapped. They were left with just a single note explaining all of the ways that the killer was going to try and murder his wife and daughter, and it was signed off with nothing but Truly Devious. Stevie's intention in going into the school is to solve the mysterious Truly Devious murder, as it is a cold case and has gone much too long without being solved. Trilogy was fantastic. I absolutely adored the Truly Devious series, and I'm so excited for this next book. Stevie is invited to this summer camp in order to help look into the famous Box in the Woods murders that happened there, where several camp counselors were killed. So it's kind of a new mystery for Stevie, and I'm so excited because I love the character of Stevie and I love all of her friends. They end up coming with her to the summer camp in Box in the Woods, and I'm just so excited to read it. Next up, I am looking forward to reading A Psalm of Storms and Silence by Roseanne A. Brown. This is the sequel and final book in the A Song of Race and Ruin duology. This second book follows the immediate aftermath of A Song of Race and Ruin, which is a high fantasy West African inspired YA story following 2 characters, one of which is the crown princess, who is forced to marry and is forced to, in her mind, kill the person that she ends up marrying in order to bring her mother back from the dead. Simultaneously, it follows Malik, who is a young orphan boy who loses his sister to a terrifying spirit, and the only way to get his sister back is to kill the crown princess. So he competes in this challenge in which the winner wins the hand of the princess in marriage. I loved this book so much. I read it last summer almost in one sitting, and I absolutely can't wait for the sequel and the finale to this story. I am losing my mind waiting for it, but hopefully it comes out really soon. And then finally, the last book that I'm excited to come out this year is going to be Redemptor, which comes out in October, by Jordan Afueko. This is the sequel to Ray Bear. Ray Bear was one of my favorite books that I read this year. It follows our main character, Terasai, who has grown up her entire life with just her guardian, her mother, who she's only allowed to refer to as the lady. Terasai has a magical ability in which when she touches somebody or an object, she is able to see their entire life. She's raised by the lady with one purpose, and that is to compete in these challenges as a child in order to become a part of the Emperor's Council of 11. These challenges are started as a child, and all these kids live together with the young Emperor to be, and they compete in these challenges. They are given these tasks to overcome, and the final 11 end up becoming the council who will live with the Emperor and serve the Emperor for the rest of their days. There is one councilman for every area in this magical world, and each person is born with an inherent protection from a certain type of death, since there are only 12 different types of death, I believe. Once the Emperor picks a councilman from a certain area, he then absorbs that person's protection, so the Emperor becomes nearly immortal. The only thing that can kill him is old age, unless one of his councilmen tries to kill him. So this, to become a councilman, requires a ton of trust and a element of love towards the Emperor, and from the Emperor to his councilmen, they become a family. However, Our main character is forced into this competition without any ideas of what she's doing there until her mother, the lady, gives her the express instruction that she is unable to defy, and that is to kill the crown prince once she falls in love with him. This story was insane, and the found family that was created in it was fantastic. I absolutely loved the way that these characters interacted with each other, and I absolutely can't wait to see the sequel. Next up is to talk about your biggest disappointment. And for that, it has to be The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. As you can see, I haven't even finished it. I am like 60 pages in, and I'm struggling with this. I put it down months ago, and I still haven't picked it up yet because I'm just not having a great time reading it. I didn't love The Night Circus, but I've heard so many good things about The Starless Sea, and I've heard from a lot of people that if you didn't like The Night Circus, this might be the one to go for, but it is not working out for me so far. I'm just bored. The writing's pretty, yes, but I am a huge plot person, and there hasn't been a hell of a lot of plot so far. So I am not looking forward to picking this up again. However, I know that I will because I told my friend I would read it. Hopefully its expectations are brought to fruition and I do end up enjoying it at least a little bit. Next up is your biggest surprise, and I have two answers for this one. The first being You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is a YA contemporary, which is the reason it was the biggest surprise for me. I do not read a lot of YA contemporary. I don't typically enjoy it. However, this one became one of my new favorite books of all time. I don't read a lot of YA contemporary, so that is why this is such a big surprise for me. This follows Liz, who is a young queer black girl going to school in this like prestigious, very rich white school, who wants more than anything to become a doctor. When her scholarship ends up falling through, she ends up entering in this competition to become prom queen because the winners of prom king and prom queen get a scholarship for post-secondary education. However, Liz is learning that it's much tougher to become prom queen than she anticipated, and also she's starting to fall for one of the other girls competing for prom queen. I love this book so much. I read this book last month and it was one of my favorite reads of the year. I love Liz so much. Her character was fantastic. Being a young queer woman and also having so many different hardships in her life when it comes to chronic illness and her family members, it was just an incredible story and an incredible journey watching her grow into herself and to learn more about herself as she's going through this competition. I loved the way that she interacted with other characters, specifically her relationship with her little brother was fantastic, and her relationship with like her childhood friend who they had had a falling out at the beginning of high school, and watching them kind of reconnect and rekindle their friendship. So amazing, and I can't get over it. I can't get over how much I love this. The relationship in it, the romance was so sweet and just so pure and so heartwarming, and I can't recommend it enough. I absolutely adored it. The other biggest surprise was The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. This I read as a buddy read with my friend Kayla, and we expected it to be a fantasy romance, and it was nothing but, so that's why it was a surprise for me. This was a high fantasy full of political intrigue that I absolutely adored. This follows our main character Maya, who is a half-goblin son of the Elvish king. He lives in isolation away from the court because he is kind of a disgrace to his father, the emperor. But one day he learns that his entire family, his father, and his 3 older brothers have all died in a mysterious crash, and he is now the Goblin Emperor. He goes into this court that he knows nothing about, with no ideas of the history, of the intrigue, of the way that politics works in this country, and has to make himself a respectable king. This is such a great story. I love the character of Maya so much. He's precious and needs to be protected at all costs. And I love the way that he made these great relationships with the people of his court who did not expect him to do a good job and did not want him there at all. His resilience in the face of adversity, in the face of assassinations, in the face of people trying to convince themselves he was unworthy. He did such a great job of proving himself, not that he needed to, and really coming into his own as a ruler and a fair ruler. I absolutely adored this. If you're into high fantasy, I highly recommend it. Such a great, great, great story. Next up, hilariously, is favorite new author or new to you author, and I am choosing Catherine Addison and Leah Johnson for the reasons I just described in the biggest surprise category. I loved the writing of both of these so much, and I think the authors have done a great job of creating these worlds and these really, really, really lovable characters. I will definitely be following both of them with their newest releases. Catherine Addison is coming out with a spin-off based on one of the side characters from The Goblin Emperor. And next month, Leah Johnston's second book, Rise to the Sun, comes out, and I will be picking out both. Leah Johnston is actually a debut author, and Catherine Addison is a new-to-me author. Next up is favorite new fictional crush. I've got 3 for this one. First, I've got both Eve Brown and Jacob Wayne from Act Your Age Eve Brown. Eve is such a dynamic character, and I love her so much. She's such a sweetheart, and she just seems to be sunshine personified. I love that she loves to cook and to bake and to just create things, and that her purpose in life that she has decided is to just care for people. I love that so much because I relate to that so much. I love doing things for other people. My love language is acts of service, and I absolutely adore Eve, and she's just such a sweetheart. And then there's Jacob, who is her exact opposite. He's a super cynical and pessimistic man who seems to be kind of a jerk on the outside, but is actually a warm marshmallow fluff on the inside, which is one of my favorite character tropes of all time. I love them both so much, and watching their relationship bloom in this story was one of my favorite things that happened this year. Next up, my other favorite fictional crush is Sanjeet from Ray Bear. Sanjeet is one of the other Council of 11, and he is a kind of large character whose power is very concerning to others. His power is that he can tell where everybody's weaknesses are in every person that he encounters, so he's considered to be a very dangerous person. But he is also a massive teddy bear inside, and he has such great care and love for the Emperor and also for his other council members that he would do absolutely anything for them. And I love this character so much, and I can't wait to see more of him in Redemptor. Next up is newest favorite character, and for this one I have to go with Mi-young from Wicked Fox. Mi-young is a Gamina, which is a 9-tailed fox shapeshifter who devours the souls of men. This is an urban fantasy set in the streets of Seoul, and it follows Mi-young as she tries to navigate her way through this world as a demon type creature who is immortal and who lives off of the souls of other humans. She's trying to do what her mother asks of her and to keep a low profile, but she ends up saving the life of a young man named Jin-hoon who is being attacked by a goblin. And in doing so, she loses her special fox bead, which is basically her soul. And she has to go on this journey with Jin-hoon in order to get her bead back and to save her life, basically. She's hysterical. She just gives 0 shits about anything. And she just puts on this huge act of being such a tough girl and having no feelings, but then she's just absolutely enamored with Ji-hoon and really starts to come into her own and learn that emotions are not a bad thing and relationships are not a bad thing, especially with humans. And I love her character growth throughout this story, how much she comes to love her friends and have great friendships with them, and how she learns to kind of come out of the shell or the shadow of her mother and to become her own person. I adore her so much, and I love this story with all of my heart. Next up are books that made you cry. I've got 3 answers for this. The first one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book I did not expect to cry to, which is one of the reasons I wanted to mention it. This is an adult romance, but it also has lots of darker / sadder themes in it. This follows January and Augustus. January is a romance writer, and Augustus is a literary fiction writer trying to write the next great American novel. The two of them end up spending the summer with each other as they end up being neighbors for the summer in this beach town, resort town. They knew each other from college. They were actually considered to be enemies in college. And the two of them don't really have much stock in the other preferred genre of writing. So they set a challenge to each other to write in each other's genre for the summer. So January has to try and write the next great American novel, and Augustus has to try and write a romance. I love their dynamic. I loved their kind of enemies to lovers snarky attitude towards each other, but the story also hit on a lot of really important topics, including death of a parent, which is what made me cry, as well as mentions of childhood abuse, and they actually go and visit a suicide cult, which was really threw me off at one point. But this story really hit me hard at the end when January is coming to terms with the death of her father, which is at the beginning of this and not a spoiler. And just looking at that relationship and dealing with that relationship really hit me hard and really made me cry and bumped this book up from a 4-star to a 5-star, in my opinion. Next up is The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This one is like not surprising that it made me cry. This is a retelling of the Iliad from the point of view of Briseis, who is a Grecian queen who ends up becoming a prisoner of war and ends up becoming the slave of Achilles. This story does not pull any punches. It definitely is a really important read and talks about some really important themes, including what happens to women during as prisoners of war in ancient times, including actually all the way up until semi-modern times. It was a really tough read, but it was a really important read. I think I read it in one sitting. Absolutely adored the story, and I loved getting this point of view of somebody who typically wouldn't have a voice in a lot of ancient Greek writing and history. So really sad, but really good. And then finally, the last book that made me read that I want to talk about is The Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a historical fiction set in the 1950s, and we follow Lily, who is a young queer Chinese American trying to come to terms with her sexuality and her identity during the height of the Red Scare in San Francisco in the States in the 1950s. Being a first-generation American, Lily has to go through a lot of different emotional trials, and the ending of this book absolutely killed me. It was definitely a tough read, but really, really, really great read as well. I loved the romance, and I loved the setting, and the ending just made me bawl, so love that for me. Next up is a book that made you happy, and again, I have to go with Act Your Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the third book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, and it deals with the youngest of the Brown sisters, Eve, who is very much a free spirit. She does what she wants to do when she wants to do it, but she is also very insecure. She ends up being forced by her parents to go out and get herself a job for an entire year that can support herself rather than being supported by her parents. And in doing so, she comes across the interviews for a chef position at this little B&B. And she meets the owner of the B&B, Jacob, and they like clash right away. It is a enemies to lovers romance set in this cute little B&B, and it talks about food and music and love, and it's just absolutely adorable, and I couldn't get enough of it. I already talked about how much I love Eve and I love Jacob, and watching their romance bloom in this was just such an incredible experience. I've read this twice this year because it gives me such serotonin, and it is definitely joining its other companion novels as being some of my absolute favorite comfort reads of all time. Next up is the most beautiful book that you have bought or received this year. Again, I've got 3 answers for this. First up is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. Look at how pretty this is. This is a dark academia, really messed up thriller apparently, / horror. I don't really know what it's about. I'm planning on reading it next month, but look how gorgeous this is with like the wrought iron fence, but in the pinks and the blues and the purples, and it's just so pretty. Next up also is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, another horror paranormal, but this one is YA. Look at that cover. It is just gorgeous with all the flowers and the beautiful illustration. It's just so pretty. Oh, I can't get over it. I'm so excited to read that. And finally, this one, which was also one of my most anticipated books of this year, The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Again, look at that. The illustration is just gorgeous. The coloring is fantastic, and I am pumped. This is like a Regency-inspired, Victorian-inspired world, and you're following Nina, who is about to join the ranks of these highest-ranking socialites, but she has to try and control her telekinesis, because this is also partly a fantasy. As of most of what I know about it, my friend Kayla has read this book like 6 times this year, so I'm really much looking forward to it, but look how pretty it is. I can't get over it. Next up is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I've got 3 on this list, 2 of which I'll talk about first. The first one I really need to read is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab. I feel like everybody and their mother has read this book already this year, and I desperately need to. This tells the story of Addie LaRue, who makes a deal with a type of devil figure in order to live forever. However, the caveat is that she is cursed to be forgotten by everyone she speaks to the moment that they look away. Addie lives her life in, I think it's like Paris and New York. I think she's in London for a little bit. It follows her over a couple centuries of her life living as an invisible woman, and then one day she ends up being remembered by a boy named Henry in a bookshop, and her whole world kind of changes. I've heard some really mixed reviews about this, and I really do enjoy Victoria Schwab's writing, so I really need to get on it and read this soon. I think I'm gonna save it for like fall time, but I'm desperately needing to read this. Next up is Queen of Volts by Amanda Foody. This I really need to read because it is the finale, the last book in the Ace of Shades trilogy, the Shadow Game trilogy. Ace of Shades is one of my absolute favorite series of all time, so I don't know why I'm taking so long to read this damn book. Mostly because I think I don't want it to end. This world has such an incredible fantasy element to it. The story follows Anne, who is a really proper girl and going to a finishing school, when she finds out that her mother has gone missing and ends up having to cross the river and go into the city of New Rains, which is known as the City of Sin. In order to find her, she has to team up with a con man named Levi, and in doing so they go through this incredible adventure that I can't even explain how great it is. This book has bisexual rep, it's got POC rep, and it's just one of the most enchanting stories I've ever read in my life. I'm obsessed and I really need to read this, but I also kind of don't want to read this because I don't want the story to end, but I need to read this so badly. And then finally, I really need to read this book because it's been on my shelf for much too long, and that is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is an adult fantasy. This story follows a multitude of characters, and it has amazing sapphic romance, it has dragons, it has queendoms, and it has magic. I don't even know what it's about besides those dragons and the magic and the sapphic romance. That's all I know, and that's all I really need to know, but this book's massive, and I've had it on my shelf for too long for it to... It's been on my shelf for much too long considering what it is about, and I know I'm going to love it. I just haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, and I desperately need to finish it by the end of this year. That is my goal for this book. Finally, the last prompt in the mid-year book freakout tag is to mention your favorite bookish creators. For this, I've got 3 answers and 3 of my favorite booktubers that are just killing the game right now, and I'm absolutely obsessed with their videos. The first is Chloe over on Books with Chloe and Journal with Chloe. Chloe is such a light and an inspiration, and I absolutely adore her videos. Every time I see one, I instantly have to watch it. She gives me such inspiration for my bullet journaling, my reading journaling, and also just a bunch of recommendations of books from her because I know I like a lot of the same books that she does. But she's just an absolute light in this community and just brings me so much serotonin, and I absolutely love her so much. Next up is Jessie from Bowties and Books. Jessie is a staple in the booktube community, absolutely, but they are one of my absolute favorite booktubers. I just recently competed in Queer Blackathon, which was a mini round of Jessie's Blackathon readathon. They put so much work into their videos and into their readathons and into their engagement with this community that it can't go unnoticed. They are an absolute joy and an absolute delight to see on my screen every time that I see them pop up with a new video, and everybody needs to go check them out if you aren't already. And finally, the last person I want to talk about was Riley Marie, and I absolutely adore Riley so much. She gives me such great romance and thriller recommendations, and she was one of the first romance booktubers I ever followed on YouTube. But again, she's also just such a sweetheart, so bright and light and inspiring. She does an amazing job of bringing romance to the forefront of her reading, which I think is a really great thing to do, and she is the one who introduced me to romance in this community. Absolutely adore Riley. Everybody should go check her out as well. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this mid-year book freakout tag. If you did, please give this video a like because it really does support my channel, and let me know down in the comments below what your favorite and least favorite book of 2021 has been so far. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish and writing videos every week, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.